So I've actually covered a couple of supposed Elder Scrolls 6 leaks in the past couple of months already, and so far none of those leaks have really even been close to legit. However, this leak is pretty much a completely different story, and I think there's a very good chance of it being true. Okay, so to start things off, I actually want to talk Fallout 4 DLC just for a second here, and I know you guys are probably thinking, Roshank, how the hell is Fallout 4 DLC at all related? But believe me, it's gonna tie in just a second here. For those of you who haven't heard yet, a Nuka World DLC for Fallout 4 is basically confirmed at this point. Recently, some members of the Fallout community were digging around the files for Fallout 4, and they found something called DLCNukaWorld.esm. Now, just for clarification's sake, an ESM file is basically something that's needed to start up or I guess fire up a DLC. And again, this was found in the files for the actual game, so it basically confirms a future DLC that is going to be called Nuka World, or at least goes by the codename Nuka World. If you still don't believe me in all of this, I'll link a couple videos down below in the description covering the topic in more depth. Alright, so now I want you all to take a look at the following document from Bethesda's E3 2014 appearance. Keep in mind, this is before Fallout 4 was even announced to the public and before we even knew that Fallout 4 existed. Pretty much, the document is addressed to all Bethesda employees and informs them of their legal obligation to secrecy on the 7 listed terms. You can sort of think of it very roughly as a legal contract. Now, if you had shown this to me before Nuka World was leaked, I would have said there's no way in hell it's legit. It looks totally sketch, and if you take it out of context, it definitely looks like more of a hoax or some sort of attempt to fool the Bethesda community into thinking that Fallout 4 and Elder Scrolls 6 are in development. But here's the deal breaker that makes me think it's actually legit: the presence of the term Fallout Nuka World. Suppose for just a second that this were indeed a hoax. Then, way back in 2014, before Fallout 4 had even been announced, and for all we knew at the time it might not ever have happened, the person who made this hoax, this supposed hoax, predicted Nuka World. But tell me guys, what are the chances that this person randomly came up with the name Nuka World, and it turned out to be legit? In 2014, we weren't even thinking about Fallout 4 DLC, and if you brought up the subject of Fallout 4 DLC, who the hell would have thought the name of a DLC would be Nuka World? It's just a completely random and totally out of the blue name. What's more likely is Bethesda had plans for either a game or some sort of larger project called Fallout Nuka World, but instead they ended up turning it into a Fallout 4 DLC. Regardless, the point is that merely the name Nuka World is way too much of a coincidence and makes me question whether it's even possible for this document to be a hoax. One counter argument I do want to address, which I heard from Mr. Matty Plays, and by the way, this is no hate on Matty because he's a great guy, but nonetheless, he argued that the fact that Pete Hines was addressed as Mr. Hines proved it was fake, since Pete always asked people to address him as just Pete. But here's the thing, this is an official document that is akin to a legal contract of sorts, so for an official document, it would make more sense to address him as Mr. Hines as opposed to Pete. One rather legitimate counter-argument though, is that the term Boston Project isn't actually a thing, since the codename for Fallout 4 was Institute. It's entirely possible that Boston Project was an alternative codename for Fallout 4, but that would be a little weird, so I actually think this is good evidence against the leak. Does it offset the whole Nuka World thing? Well, I don't really think so, but it does at least bring the document into doubt. Now, operating under the assumption that this is legit, let's take a look at the last 2 terms on the list, and those 2 terms are Elder Scrolls 6 and Project Greenheart. The first and most important thing is that Greenheart is actually a city in the province of Valenwood in the Elder Scrolls universe, so in all likelihood, Project Greenheart is the codename for some sort of Elder Scrolls project set in Valenwood. Which leaves us with 3 and pretty much only 3 possibilities for what Project Greenheart could be. The first is an Elder Scrolls Online expansion, but if you really think about it, this makes no sense, since if they were working on an ESO expansion 2 years ago, it would definitely already be out by now, but to my knowledge there isn't any past or planned ESO expansions that could possibly be Project Greenheart. The next possibility is Elder Scrolls Legends, but why the hell would you call a card game like ES Legends Project Greenheart? What does it specifically have to do with Valenwood or Greenheart? All Bethesda codenames have something to do with the actual game, as is evident with past codenames such as Institute, Workshop for Wasteland Workshop, and so on. So this is very likely not related to Elder Scrolls Legends. which means that Project Greenheart has to be the codename for the Elder Scrolls 6, and going off what I said before that codenames have something to do with the actual name of the game, Greenheart and therefore Valenwood has got to be involved in the Elder Scrolls 6. The obvious conclusion from here is that the Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be set in Valenwood. Now once again, I'd like to reiterate that this is not confirmed information. I do think there's a good chance, perhaps even over 50%, that it's going to happen, but keep in mind, I'm not an official Bethesda source or anything like that. Also, the information discussed in this video does not necessarily mean in any way that TES6 will be unveiled at E3 this year. All this indicates is that ES6 is going to be set in Valenwood, and nothing more really. I'd love to continue this discussion more down in the comments below, where I'm going to be leaving my own comment with more details on this information, and that I will update as new information comes out. In that comment, I'll be addressing some of the counter arguments and sharing my ongoing thoughts on the legitimacy of this leak. So if you're interested, be sure to contribute to the discussion down below. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.